Hello there, this is Dave Hurwitz, Executive Editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to perk up your day with 5 Expressionist operas featuring women in extremis, but each taking basically an hour or less, or even half that, and lasting only one act. So you can have your Expressionist nightmare in relatively small digestible doses, and even have more than one at a time if you feel like it. There is nothing more entertaining, let's face it, than Expressionist operas because, the plots are completely crazy, and the action is horrific, and the music is fabulous. I mean, just fabulous. Usually it's this huge orchestra, and the singers, only a couple of them, get out there and shriek and scream and carry on like maniacs. I mean, it's what's not to love. It's just terrific stuff. And these 5 works are all, in their way, classics in the genre. And some of them are quite well known. Some of them are much less so, and they may surprise you. So let's get right to it and start talking about our fabulous 5 Expressionist operas starring women in extremis for the most part. Now, the classic in the genre is Schoenberg's Erwartung, that is, expectation. This is a monodrama that's similar to mononucleosis. In other words, it features only one person, the woman, and nothing happens at all, but she makes the most amazingly ear-splitting din over the fact that nothing's happening. Okay, here's the deal. The libretto was written by a medical student friend of Schoenberg's who was evidently considered something of a littérateur back in the day. I love this libretto. It doesn't have a single coherent sentence in it. It is simply an orgy of ellipsis. There's a few words, then there's 3 dots, then there's a few more words, then there's 3 more dots, then there's a few more words. Oh, it's just marvelous. So there's a woman, she's on a wooded path. She's in a woods, forest. She's on a path. She doesn't know where she is. She doesn't know why she's there. She doesn't know what she's doing. She's incredibly fearful. She stumbles over the corpse of her dead lover, who she's murdered before she went insane, and she doesn't know, how he got there. All he knows is that it transpires as we go through the ellipsis that he had been hanging out with wo ist die denn, die Frau, die Hexe, die Frau mit den weißen Armen. Where is she? The witch, that slut, the woman with the white arms. Turns out her lover has probably been having an affair with the lady with the white arms, which is why she killed him. But she's waiting for him. She's still waiting for him to come to her. But of course, he's never going to do it because he's dead. So she wanders around in a completely insane fog, and the whole thing lasts about 30 minutes. It is completely atonal. That is, it's not dodecaphonic. It's not 12-tone. It just has no tonal center. And it also has almost no repetition that you can determine because she's insane. And atonal fogs are absolutely perfect for portraying insane people who are completely confused. The music is magnificent. It's just a vehicle for a wonderful soprano. This is Jessie Norman, who is no slouch in portraying crazy, insane women. Although I have to say, the queen of Erwartungen is probably Anya Celia, who recorded it spectacularly with Dochnani, and then later with Robert Kraft and a few other people. She did Erwartung at the drop of a hat. And Phyllis Brynjolfsson also did it, who was quite wonderful. A singer who specialized in contemporary music with a voice of incredible purity and absolute accuracy of intonation. But it really doesn't matter. It's just a tremendous half hour and one of Schoenberg's really masterpieces of early atonality and, of course, German Expressionism. There is nothing not to love. The next one, and it's a crown jewel, is Bartok, Bluebeard's Castle. This is the great recording. This is Kertész with Christa Ludwig and Walter Berry on Decca. It's the version that you got to start with, that everyone has to have. Now, Bluebeard's Castle has three characters, right? There's Bluebeard, and there's Judith, his latest wife, and then there's the castle. The castle is its own character. It doesn't actually sing, but it speaks through the orchestra. And it also sort of groans. You're supposed to have this sound effect when you open each of the 7 doors. It goes, which is supposed to be very ominous. And, I was once asked to do the castle, because I go, and that's supposed to be very evocative. But the story is famous, and we all know it. Bluebeard brings his wife back to his castle and says, "Hey, here's my castle." And she says, "What are those 7 doors doing there?" And he says, "Oh, you don't want to know." And she says, "Who are you kidding? Of course I want to know. Open them, damn it." And so he opens them one by one, and each one has some aspect of his masculine personality behind it. There's his treasury and his armory. And then when you get to the 5th door, which is the biggie, the one with the high C for the soprano, that has his realm. And, the scene gets brighter and brighter as each door opens up to the 5th. And he looks over his lands and says, "Look at my lands." And she says, "Big damn deal. She's kind of a downer. And then finally, as it darkens in the last door, she gets to the last door and he begs her, "Don't open the last door." And she says, "Give me the goddamn key to the last door." And he says, "Don't open the last door." It's kind of like that Porky Pig and Daffy Duck cartoon where, he's the home improvement automated guy and he says, "Never push the red button. Whatever you do, don't push the red button." And of course they push the red button and all hell breaks loose. Well, she gets the key to the 7th door, and behind the 7th door are all of his other wives who have been locked there because they too demanded the secret to the 7 doors. Although I really have never quite understood what happened to the first wife, because there weren't any wives behind the 7th door when the first wife got there. So we don't understand what happened with that, and it's probably best not to ask. And having opened all 7 doors and revealed himself utterly to her, she is now trapped forever, and Judith is forced to join the other wives behind the 7th door. Of course, there's no reason why that has to happen either. It just does. That's why it's Expressionist. And it's a magnificent, fabulous work. It was part of a trilogy, it was part of, it was supposed to be performed with the Miraculous Mandarin of the Wooden Prince. But let me tell you, an evening of that, all 3 of those would be a bit much to stomach. And Bluebeard's Castle is usually done as a concert work separately, although I saw it staged with Jesse Norman at the Met with Erwartung. And in that production, in the Erwartung, she's wandering around in what's supposedly the woods, which has a grand piano in it, and she gets to play cards with herself and have a snack, and it was just nuts. And Bluebeard's Castle was even weirder because, first of all, Bluebeard was actually blue. It was Sam Raimi, and he takes his clothes off one at a time and gets bluer and bluer, and he looks like one of the Blue Men group, that performance art group. And when you get to the 5th door that shows his realm, the whole back of the stage opens and you find out that he's an alien and they're on a space station and Earth is orbiting below. It was the dumbest thing you've ever seen. And it was actually an amazing performance because the stage designer, who was this hot to trot avant-garde stage designer guy, came out and everyone booed, which still happens from time to time at the Met, which is wonderful. It was so much fun. If only we'd had rotten vegetables to throw at him too, that would have made the evening perfect. So you've got to do Bluebeard's Castle as well. And of course, Bartok people already know it, but if you don't, it's his only opera, so you really have to give it a shot. It's so much fun. Oh gosh, it's so much fun. Next, Korngold's Violanta. Now, Violanta, he wrote when he was 17. which is a very horny 17, I might add. And it shows when you hear Violanta. Now, Violanta is one of those, Italian Renaissance decadence stories. And it's really lots of fun. What's happened is that Violanta's sister committed suicide because she had an affair and got dumped by Prince Guido. And Violanta is running around trying to get revenge. She wants revenge. And she tells her husband, it's the carnival scene in Venice, and she tells her husband that she's arranged for an assignation with Prince Guido. And when Prince Guido shows up, she's going to sing the carnival song, and her husband is going to rush out and murder him. He, of course, has some qualms about this plan, but she berates him into agreeing to do it. And Prince Guido shows up, and he's very brooding and moody and contrite, and he wants death. And I mean, he's just a poet from soup to nuts, and full of philosophical turmoil. And this, of course, she finds incredibly sexually attractive. And she confesses that she's in love with him, but her husband is waiting there saying, "Sing the bloody song, damn it, sing the bloody song." He's like standing there with his knife ready to do the deed. And so she sings the song, and he rushes out, but she interposes herself between the knife and the prince, and he stabs her to death, and she dies in his arms, singing the carnival song hysterically. Now, the music is luscious beyond anyone's capacity to understand. The fact that Korngold was 17 doesn't make any difference. The fact that he was a horny 17 does make a difference. That's what makes the music so exciting and juicy. And it is, he was, of course, the greatest musical prodigy since Mozart and Mendelssohn. And it's a completely fully realized adult sounding work. But it has all of that youthful enthusiasm that you get from horny teenagers. So it's totally fantastic. Next, we have Zemlinsky's A Florentine Tragedy. I always get this confused with Violanta because they all take place in Italy during the Renaissance. Now, I first thought that because this was called A Florentine Tragedy, that the plot had to be about spinach, because everything Florentine has spinach. There's lasagna Florentine with spinach, and veal Florentine, which is like stuffed with spinach. I mean, if it's Florentine, it has spinach. So I figured that this was a tragedy about spinach. It's not, believe it or not. It's actually a tragedy that takes place in Florence. It's that Florentine. It's not the culinary Florentine with spinach. It just happens to be in Florence. I was a little disappointed. I was looking forward to an expressionist tragic opera about spinach. But no, in this particular opera, you've got these three nutty characters. They are married. I forget their names. It isn't Prince Guido, but it's like Simone and Alfalfa. No, that's spinach. Never mind. Now I'm stuck on vegetables talking about this. No. What happens is the husband and wife hate each other. Their marriage is a mess. She's having an affair. He knows it. He doesn't really care because he thinks she's revolting. She thinks he's disgusting. And it's driving him absolutely crazy. And so she decides, finally, she wants to get rid of him and live with her lover. And he decides that he's going to have some sort of duel. And they have a fight. And he kills the guy. And the two of them discover, once he's dead, that it reawakens their sexual passion, the sight of the bloody corpse lying there. Of course, it's very psychologically healthy. I mean, they would have been better off with spinach. I mean, there's no question about it, right? I mean, the last scene is, she sits there, she walks over, steps over the corpse and says, "I didn't know you were so strong." And he said, "I didn't realize you were so beautiful." And they go at it as the curtain falls. Now, this is Alexander von Zemlinsky, who was, Schoenberg's brother-in-law or something like that. And he never went all the way into atonality, but he was a masterful conductor and a masterful composer, a wonderful, wonderful composer. The only problem is that everything he did, everyone else did slightly more famously, not necessarily better. He was a tremendous, tremendous musical craftsman. And A Florentine Tragedy is a wonderful, wonderful way to get to know his work. This is the performance with Riccardo Chailly of the Concertgebouw, and let's see, who are the singers? I have to find out. Hang on a second, because it's in the booklet. I'll just let you know, because it's really a marvelous performance. Let's see, the Prince of Florence is Guido Bardi. Florentine Prince? No, that's what he is. Heinz Kruse, Albert Doman, and Iris Vermillion. That's it. You want to know who the soprano is, because the soprano is doing all the work in all of these operas. The guys are just along for the ride, and the women are there to generally drive the plot. It's very interesting, actually, when you look at these stories. I mean, they are, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. There was this image in fin-de-siècle, especially Vienna, but fin-de-siècle Europe, the realization of the idea of the femme fatale, of the corrupting and lethal power of womanhood. It was extremely psychologically disturbing. I mean, that's why you had Freud. He was there to explain all of this to us, right? I mean, what was going on in the inner psyche of these twisted male people, and their rather sick relationship towards females and women and what they represented and their erotic power, which is really what all of this stuff is about. And nowhere is it more about that than in Hindemith's early expressionist opera, Sancta Susanna. There's only been a couple recordings of this. This is hot stuff. You can find it on YouTube, and you really should watch it. Again, it's only like half an hour long. This is, psychotic sexual perversity in a convent, which is, the ultimate in expressionist decadence. It really is. I mean, psychotic sexual perversity in convents has been an image that has run through opera and literature throughout the Romantic era. It most famously began with Meyerbeer's opera, Robert le Diable, Robert the Devil, and the ballet of the resurrected dead nuns whose souls were resting in hell. And boy, did that cause a scandal in Paris in the 1830s. I mean, there's nothing like a bunch of dead, resurrected ballet nuns to get your juices flowing, right? I mean, it's wonderful. And then, of course, there's Prokofiev's opera, The Fiery Angel, which ends with demonic possession in a convent. Although in the Kirov production that I saw at the Met, it looked more like demonic possession in a laundromat, because they show their demonic possessions by throwing sheets around. So, it was like, psychosis in a laundromat. But in this one, in Hindemith's opera, Sancta Susanna, and this, by the way, he wrote three early operas. One is Das Nushi, and the other was Kokoschka's Murder Hoffnung des Frauen, or whatever you call it, Murder the Hope of Women, which could not, in today's political climate, ever be performed. I hesitate to even say it, but that was what it's called. It's one of the great expressionist tracts of its era. And it was supposed to be shocking and horrifying, and it is, believe you me. But this is the one that caused the real scandal. Susanna is a nun, and she is full of repressed longing and urges and uncontrollable desire and lust. And she's told about her predecessor, the previous nun, who, unable to control her desires and satanic urgings, gets bricked up alive behind the altar. Now that, of course, doesn't dissuade Susanna at all. She actually finds the idea appealing. So what she does is she rips the loincloth off of the crucified Christ hanging on the altar and starts, embracing the statue of the crucified Christ in the most lascivious way, and the other nuns come out all crying, "Satan, Satan!" And that's where it sort of ends. But presumably what's going to happen to her is that she's going to get bricked up with the rest of them. Now, I happen to have the score to this opera. It's like, I don't have it here. It's this enormous thing. It's in the closet there, with my Guiro. And it's this big green thing. It's written for this big, huge orchestra, and the sound of it is very much like Korngold and Zemlinsky and Schrecker and those people. It's fin-de-siècle German decadence on steroids. It's a wonderful, wonderful work. It was originally recorded on Vergo. This one features as Susanna Susan Bullock, who's quite marvelous. There's only 5 characters: Susanna, Clementia, who's Della Jones, and an old nun, and a maid, and a farmhand. And this is with Jan Pascal Tortelier in the BBC Philharmonic. It also includes this disc, the Drei Gesänge, the 3 songs, Opus 9, which are of the same style and are amazing, amazing works. Also scored for soprano and ridiculously large orchestra, 8 horns and all that stuff. It's real fin-de-siècle German decadence, and it was a kind of style that Hindemith abandoned rather quickly after causing the horrendous scandal that was to persist long enough to get him in trouble with the Nazis when they came to power in the 1930s, because he'd even written these things, even though he basically sort of disowned them later in his life, because he got very virtuous, unfortunately, as an older composer, and was not into Expressionist decadence. But boy, oh boy, it was a fun phase while it lasted. So Sancta Susanna, guys, go for it. You're going to enjoy it to the nines. You really will. It's a wonderful rainy day kind of piece. You know what I mean? So anyway, here are the 5. Just to recapitulate, let me put them in order here. Schoenberg's Erwartung, Bartok's Bluebeard's Castle, Korngold's Violanta, Zemlinsky's A Florentine Tragedy, and last but not least, Hindemith's Sancta Susanna. 5 psychotic operas with psychotic plots and, fortunately, and best of all, totally psychotic music. Keep on listening, folks, and enjoy!